In the cold, pre-dawn hours of May 21st, 1982, the remote and windswept San Carlos Bay in the Falkland Islands became the stage for one of the most daring military operations in modern history. This was the beginning of a pivotal chapter in the Falklands War, a conflict that would test the resolve, courage, and ingenuity of both British and Argentine forces. Under the cover of darkness, a flotilla of British warships and transport vessels slipped silently into the calm, icy waters of the bay, carrying thousands of soldiers determined to reclaim the islands from Argentine forces that had seized them just weeks earlier. The British commanders, stationed aboard the flagship HMS Hermes, had meticulously planned this operation. San Carlos Bay, with its narrow waterways and towering, rugged mountains, was chosen for its strategic advantages. Shielded from radar detection and surrounded by natural barriers, the bay offered a hidden gateway into the heart of the occupied territory. Admiral Sandy Woodward, the mastermind behind the operation, knew that success hinged on one critical factor: the element of surprise. The British task force was vastly outnumbered in the air, and the Argentine Air Force, with its fleet of A-4 Skyhawks and Mirage 3 jets, posed a formidable threat. Woodward understood that only through stealth and precision could they hope to secure a foothold on the islands. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the operation swung into motion. Silent rubber boats, carrying elite troops from 40 Commando Royal Marines and the 3rd Battalion, Parachute Regiment, 3 Para, glided across the dark waters toward the shore. Beneath the surface, the nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror patrolled the coastline, its crew vigilant for any sign of enemy activity. The British soldiers, their breath visible in the frigid air, braced themselves for what lay ahead. At 4:30 a.m., the first boots touched the sandy beaches. To their relief, not a single shot was fired. The Argentines, caught off guard, had left the beaches undefended. But this initial success was fleeting. As the sun rose over the bay, the Argentines quickly realized what was happening. The calm of the morning was shattered by the roar of jet engines as Argentine A-4 Skyhawks streaked across the sky, their pilots determined to repel the invaders. The British ships, anchored in the bay, became sitting ducks. The first wave of attacks targeted the supply ship HMS Ardent, which was struck by a barrage of bombs and missiles. The ship erupted in flames, its deck transformed into a hellish inferno of fire and smoke. The British Navy fought back with Sea Wolf missiles, but the damage was done. Dozens of sailors were killed or wounded, and the once pristine waters of the bay were now littered with debris and burning wreckage. The British forces on the shore, meanwhile, worked frantically to establish a defensive perimeter. Engineers and soldiers labored to build a makeshift airstrip using stones and dirt, while light armored vehicles like the Scorpion and Scimitar moved into position to guard against potential counterattacks. The Argentines, though initially caught off guard, began to mount a response. Sporadic clashes broke out, such as the brief but intense firefight at Fanning Head, where Argentine troops attempted to ambush the advancing British forces. After a few minutes of fierce gunfire, the Argentines withdrew, leaving behind a trail of blood and abandoned equipment. By midday, the situation had grown even more dire. A second wave of Argentine aircraft, armed with deadly French-made Exocet missiles, descended upon the bay. One missile struck HMS Antrim, causing significant damage, while another exploded near HMS Brilliant, sending a massive plume of water into the air. The British soldiers on the beach, many of whom were still digging trenches and transporting supplies, could only watch in horror as the bay turned into a battlefield. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning fuel and the deafening roar of explosions. For many, it was a moment of grim realization. This was no longer just a mission. It was a fight for survival. As night fell, the bay became a surreal landscape of fire and shadows. Argentine jets continued their relentless attacks, their bombs illuminating the darkness with blinding flashes of light. The British forces, though battered and exhausted, refused to yield. On the makeshift airstrip, Harrier jets took off and landed in a desperate bid to maintain air superiority. The soldiers in the trenches, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, huddled together for warmth and comfort. Many wrote final letters to their loved ones, their hands trembling as they worked by the dim light of handheld lamps. The ground beneath them shook with each explosion, a constant reminder of the chaos that surrounded them. By dawn on May 22nd, The cost of the operation was painfully clear. The British had suffered 75 fatalities, with hundreds more wounded. Several ships lay burning in the bay, their charred hulls a testament to the ferocity of the Argentine attacks. Yet, despite the heavy losses, the British had achieved their objective. San Carlos Bay was firmly in their hands, and the first steps toward reclaiming the Falklands had been taken. From the hills above the bay, British armored vehicles began to advance inland. While Harrier jets patrolled the skies, their presence a sign that the tide of the war was beginning to turn. For the Argentines, the battle was a devastating blow. They had lost 649 soldiers and, more importantly, the initiative in the conflict. The bold and audacious landing at San Carlos Bay had given the British a crucial foothold, one they would use to launch their eventual assault on Port Stanley, the capital of the Falklands. Over the next few weeks, the British forces would push forward, driven by the memory of those who had fallen and the determination to see the mission through to its end. The Battle of San Carlos Bay was more than just a military engagement. It was a testament to the resilience and courage of those who fought there. It was a night when the bay slept only to the sound of explosions, a day when the fate of nations hung in the balance. And it was a moment in history that would be remembered not just for its bloodshed, but for the unyielding spirit of those who dared to fight against the odds.